pretty neat, classic beta, and I am here to talk to you about the first month or so of classic when it comes out. And the reason I'm doing this is there's a lot of people talking about here's how you gear, here's where you need to be getting your best in slot stuff, here's how to play a class. I haven't seen many things at all about what you're supposed to be doing in the first month. Things that we're not going to talk about with the first month of classic. Number one, we're not talking about rating. We're not going to talk about rating at all. How to approach a raid or anything like that, because 99.9% of people in the first 30 days won't even step foot in a raid. Most people are still going to be leveling. You're going to be gearing, or at least gearing, in 5-mans and waiting on 39 other idiots to level and finish doing all their other shit in Attune and all that. So we're not going to talk about rating. We're also definitely not going to talk about AQ and Nax or any. I mean, obviously we're not talking about raids, but we're definitely. I want to emphasize, put AQ and Nax out of your mind. Like when you're right now, you're trying to figure out what do I want to play. You need to be thinking about what sounds fun, not what the best damage dealer is in Nax. Because if that, first of all, if that's a question you're asking yourself. You're probably not even going to see Nax. I'm just going to be honest. There's a lot of time commitments that are involved in that. We'll get into some of those things in a minute. You want to look at what's going to be fun, right? What do you want to play? You know, if you play a mage on live, maybe you want to experience what playing the one-button caster is on beta. Play a warlock on live, maybe you want to experience what the one-button caster is like on classic, not beta, classic. And you know, so things like this. So we're going to talk about 5 main things. Leveling, how to get gold, because this is an important thing. Attunements, indirect really rating, but it's a big part of classic. Gearing, and just general talking about a guild. Now, in terms of gearing, I recommend you go over here to Wowhead, you click yourself on Classic, or you just, I'm going to link this in the description, you go over here and you read some of the stuff. Most of the stuff is good for if you're just trying to figure out how do I do this relatively efficiently. There's hyper optimizations that you can do to any leveling path, any build, any whatever. But unless you're literally planning on leveling in 72 hours, that's pointless. So these are great guides. They have a lot of information. They have a lot of good stuff talking about the differences, general differences in just like questing and things like that for every class, and general overall things that you want to note. One thing that I've personally noticed is that you need to get in the habit of always trying to kill something with minimal damage taken and mana used. The reason why is because the time that you spend sitting and drinking is times that you're not going to somewhere else, right? The times that you're moving, you should be trying to do something else at the same time. So if you're moving, try and tag a mob now and again and kind of kill it while you're running. Things like that. You know, if you're a hunter, you should always be shooting at something, right? If you're going from one side of the map to the other to a quest zone, you should be killing stuff on your way. You might take a little longer to get there, but you're going to gain like 2 or 3 bars on your way over there. Whereas the guy that got there, killed the stuff, and then left is not getting anything in that time that he's running. So trying to be efficient with that. But otherwise, like, check these things out. They have good information on specs, what to do. There's a couple of them that recommend respecking. I don't think that's quite as important. I think you just kind of optimize in your own little path, and you'll be fine. So getting gold. Now, getting gold is a lot of that in most private servers that talk about playing the auction house, things like that. And that's good, but in the first month of servers being out, first month of where, you know, everyone's level 1 on day 1 of this server, and most of the realm is at 30 days in, most of the realm is going to be between 20 and 50, somewhere in that range. And you need to keep that in mind, and because of that, you're not going to be able to do these gold making, a lot of these things that the gold making guys talk about, you know, selling rune cloth and selling this, that, and the other, because no one's just got gold at all. So one thing that's very important is going through some of the zones. There's a couple of guides on YouTube that talk about this. Killing trash mobs, Eastern Plague Lands is a great example of this, that drop, you know, animals that drop body parts, and you sell the vendor the body parts. And it sounds painful as hell, and it is, but that is actually the most gold, like time efficient gold making opportunity that you have when no one else has gold, right? You can farm all the rune cloth that you want, but if no one's got gold to sell it, or if it's just as if no one's got gold to buy your rune cloth, then you're basically farming stuff to vendor. So farm the things that vendor for the highest amount, which is typically these animal body parts. Eastern Plague Lands, I know, is a really good one. There's a couple other these zones. Stockpiling items early on that you will sell. So if you and a couple buddies go farm righteous orbs, you can probably sell those pretty well later on. These are all good ideas. So that kind of covers that. Getting gold while leveling is another thing. You know, you do need about 100 gold at level 40 to get your mount. Very important things are, don't train things that you don't need, right? Like, don't train undead tracking as a paladin if you're not going to need it. Just as an example, right? If you don't plan on killing any, hunters typically don't train a lot of things because you just don't need to cast spells. So things like that, you want to keep that in mind. That's one way to just avoid spending money. That can save you 30-40 gold by the time you get to level 40. And then other than that is trying to focus on grinding things as much as you can and selling as much stuff as you can. It's about the only other way you can do that. So gearing and attunements. So there are two main attunements that you're going to have to worry about getting through. MC and Ani. MC involves a quick BRD run. Ani involves two very, very long quest chains on either Horde or Alliance side. Highly recommend you start those as early as you can, because finding groups for those takes time. Finding groups for anything takes time. Kind of goes into gearing, which is your 5-mans and your crafting. And in the 5-mans, there's some pretty cool items that drop in BRD, and you know, you'll want to get a group for those and start getting through all this mess, right? I mean, there's so much that you have to do for the Ani attunement. I remember when I did it on when Classic was live servers back 14 years ago. I mean, that shit literally took me about a month to finally finish. And you gotta really work hard and be proactive in that sort of thing. There is no, you know, the big joke is there is no LFD button anymore. So you gotta find the groups, you gotta go through, do all the stuff, do your escort on Alliance, all that good stuff. So, you know, try and be very proactive about that. Start that stuff early. Do all the solo stuff that you can early on. All that. Gearing. So 5-mans. You do not have access to Dire Maul when the game goes live. You do not have access to Kazakh when the game goes live. You do not have access to tier 0.5 when the game goes live. So you need to be looking through. There is a very cool spreadsheet right here that has all items that are droppable, and it also has trying to find it. Equipment and enchant. Yeah, this has pre-raid best in slot. Some of these things are going to cost an absurd amount of money or are completely random. It is to be determined whether things like the Lionheart's Helm are even going to be available. We don't know yet. I would recommend not counting on things like on these craftables being in. I think these were added in 1.12. I haven't heard for sure whether or not this pattern will be available. This pattern doesn't even drop until Azure Ghost anyways, so things to keep in mind. But yeah, so you need to be very proactive in trying to get your 5-man and your crafting gear. A lot of classes have things like Devil Sword gauntlets that are best in slot crafting gear, and just kind of take a look through things, and understand also kind of what your time commitments are. You can't, if you don't have time to sit in BRD, don't count on the Savage Gladiator chain for your best in slot. For example, for a warrior, right? Don't count on trying to get 2 freezing bands as a frost mage if you don't have the gold for it, or if you know you're not going to have the gold for it. So these are things to keep in mind. Crafting, figure out if you have a BOP item that you will need. Otherwise, just keep an eye out and figure out, oh, can I farm some stuff and have someone else craft it in my guild? It's all good. So the final thing I want to talk about is finding a guild, and what goes into that. So the absolute first thing you need to do when you're looking for a guild is you need to spend a moment and identify how much time you actually want to commit to doing any sort of raiding, any sort of anything like that. You need to understand also that in a lot of these guilds there is requirements outside of raiding, right? You need to have your first aid. You need to have your first aid leveled up. You need to have herbalism likely on some character, and you need to be able to farm herbs on. For some of these guilds will require you to have full pots and flasks for every raid. So you need to have access to all that stuff. You need to have food buffs, things like that, and you need to identify how much it is that you want to raid, and then identify what the requirements are for these guilds that raid that much, right? Any guild that's raiding 4 nights a week is planning on pushing Realm first is going to be wanting you to raid possibly 4 to 5, 6 nights a week. And outside of raiding, you're going to be expected to be doing a lot of farming. You're going to be expected to have 2 or 3 characters available so that they can clear Onyxia a bunch and have heads available. You're going to be expected to be doing Dire Maul in your sleep so that you can get all your Dire Maul buffs. A lot of stuff like that. So keep an eye on what these requirements are, especially the food and flasks. If there is flask requirements, expect that for every day of raiding, every 2 days of raiding that you spend, you need at least, really for every day of raiding that you spend, you need to expect to have 2 hours of farming time, right? So if you want to think about a good number, for every 2 hours of raiding that you spend, you need to expect to spend an hour farming flasks, food, everything else, right? So if you're in a 4-night guild raiding 4 nights a week, 16 hours, you're going to also spend 8 hours a week farming and grinding and getting all sorts of shit and trying to make sure you are prepared. And you need to make sure that you have the time to allocate to that. There's nothing worse than trying to join a guild and then 2 weeks in realizing that your wife wants you to do stuff or whatever, and now you're kind of in this shit situation. So keep that in mind. And also understand the leveling requirements. So right now we are about 3 months from Classic going live, and you need to understand leveling requirements now. Some guilds are going to want you to be max out in 2 weeks. That basically means you're expected to take the first week off just to level, and even then you're not going to make it in 1 week, probably not. So excuse me, keep that in mind. You need to have proper time offs if you're doing that, or if you're looking at more casual guild, they're going to want to, hello cat, they're going to want to have they're going to want to. If you're in a more casual guild, you'll have more time, more wiggle room, and you need to just make sure you've got things allocated for that. So, I think that's about all I wanted to talk about. Thank you for watching. If you have any other questions, post them down below. I will post links to these sites, and thank you very much.